Sue.
Actually, I'm just looking for, Susan Belleville, Brattleboro, sorry. I'm just looking for a point of clarity. John mentioned that ballots have to be in the town clerk's office by 7 p.m. on the 11th. Does that include the ballot box in the municipal parking lot? Does that qualify?
John, do you?
I believe it does. Do we have Hillary Francis on the
We
line,
do.
however? Let's get the
Let's indeed.
right answer here.
Hi, Hillary.
Can you all hear me?
Did you hear the question?
I did. Just so that y'all know, it's very, very hard to hear from Zoom, at least on my end. I've already told Seth and he's informed BCTV, but I'm having a very hard time hearing you all and the public unless they're talking through Zoom. But I did hear the question. So you can drop your ballots in the drop box in the parking lot up until 5 p.m. on election day. After that, or throughout all of election day, you can bring them directly to the polls, and there's a drop box there.
Great. Thank you, Hillary.
You're welcome.
Other comments from the public? Kate.
Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro, and I just want to follow up on what Oscar was talking about, the Charter Revision Commission. I'm on it, and our next meeting is next Thursday, August 13th, and if all goes well, I'm probably going to jinx it, but we should be done our draft charter. But it's for anyone who wants to come. It's here in this Select Board Meeting Room at 6:15 on Thursday, August 13th. You can also join us via Zoom. The Zoom link is on the charter page on the town website, plus you can watch all of our 50 prior meetings on the BCTV website.
Thanks, Kate. Okay, we're going to close public comment. It's probably worth, based on what Hillary said, if everyone who talks can get right up on the mic and speak as directly into it as we can so people can hear. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. John, would you care to take us through it?
Happy to, Oscar. 7 items on the consent agenda tonight. If you approve this agenda, you'll be approving a new tobacco license and tobacco substitute endorsement permit for Smokers Paradise Tobacco and Convenience, LLC, to be located at 227 Main Street. You'll be approving an annual entertainment license for Top of the Hill Grill, located at 632 Putney Road. You'll be approving a first-class liquor license and outside consumption permit renewal for North Chair Brewing, LLC, located at 39 Frost Street. You'll be approving a new second-class liquor license for Love Heart Larry's, LLC, which is located at 485 West River Road, the West River Cafe. You'll be appointing DPW Director Dan Tyler to the Wyndham Regional Commission's Transportation Advisory Committee. You'll be approving the purchase of a 2026 Freightliner utility crane truck to replace the 2004 crane truck for $263,197 as planned for in the 2027 utilities capital budget. And finally, you'll be awarding a contract to Bill Harlow and Sons Excavating, LLC of Putney for a total cost not to exceed $49,000, is that right? Hold on. Not to exceed $49,345 to improve 5 segments of existing stormwater infrastructure along Sunset Lake Road, funded by a FY26 Grant in Aid Award. And that is the consent agenda.
Great. Thanks, John. Any questions from the board? If not, I would look for a motion.
I'll motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Peter has moved to accept the consent agenda as presented. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Carries 5-0. All right, moving ahead to regular business, we're going to invite the legislative delegation up to the table, and we should find you guys more chairs. We have this one.
Oh.
I guess, get stuck with the small chair.
I'll take this.
You want that chair? Okay. Let me be there and you can.
You sure?
Yeah, because then you can, or where do you feel
I'm
comfortable? If
having,
you're gonna be
I'm having a little left-handedness. I'd love to stay here if that's okay.
Okay,
with you.
yeah, yeah,
My little
of
left-handed self.
Oh, interesting.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Sorry we have to squeeze you around such a tiny table. Let me find my stuff. So, to set the stage a little bit, we're welcoming the legislative delegation to our meeting for a conversation about the legislative priorities that the Select Board talked about and approved at an earlier meeting this year. There are copies on the table. The copies in the packet accidentally left out a section at the end about the town meeting resolutions. So that's in the paper copies, but otherwise they should be the same. So first, I'd like to welcome you all, and if you'd be willing to go around and introduce yourselves with whatever fancy titles are most appropriate.
Hi, I'm Emily Kornheiser.
And if you can really wrangle the mic around, it sounds like we're having volume.
Hi, I'm Emily Kornheiser. I represent Wyndham 7, which is West Brattleboro, one of 3 House seats in Brattleboro. I currently serve as the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee and the chair of the Joint Fiscal Committee. And I'm glad to be here with all of you today.
Hello, Wendy Harrison. I'm one of your 2 state senators. I live in Brattleboro, and I chair the Institutions Committee, and I am also on the Transportation Committee.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nader Hashim, the other senator for Windham County, and I serve as the chair of Judiciary, and I'm a member of the Education Committee. And I live in Dummerston.
I'm Molly Burke. I have been representing District 8 in Brattleboro for 18 years, and I'm retiring as of next January when the new legislature is sworn in, but I'm here happy to talk about these issues.
And last but not least, I'm Ian Goodnow. I represent Brattleboro Wyndham District 9, which is one of the other 3 House seats in Brattleboro. And Mr. Chair, I would raise your charter check-in to call this a legislative liaison.
Great.
Yeah, great. And thank you very much for having us. Happy to talk about the session.
And it's probably worth mentioning that, Ian, this whole thing was your idea originally? This whole big mistake that we're about to do?
No. I'm very happy to get to be on the other side of it, so.
We're grateful to Ian for that.
Yes, of course. We're all grateful to Ian. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about structure. So first of all, what this document is I think it's best thought of as a list of goals, which are the top line headings, and then a list of strategies that we came up with that might achieve those goals. In the agenda, so there are 5 headings on this list. We've added 2 things to the agenda since this happened. One is talking about the hospital and the birthing center and what's going on at the state level there. And the other at the end is just to quickly check in about the charter from the state perspective. And we may have some questions for you guys, but you may also have questions for us. So we budgeted on the agenda an hour. I think we'll probably run a little over, but we have 6.5 pretty big topics on here. What I'd like to do is go topic by topic, turn it over to you guys for anything, any comments about things that happened in the last session on that topic, things you expect in the next session. I don't think we can go bullet point by bullet point, but if there are things on the strategies list that you particularly like to call out or comment on, and particularly, I'm sure there are strategies not on our lists that you guys can suggest to us, which I think would also be really great. And then on each topic, I'll bring it back to the board. We can have some comments and questions from the board, and then we'll do public comment at the end after we've gone through everything. So, starting with the first priority, well, we'll go in agenda order and start with the hospital. I don't think that anyone really needs too much of a summary on what's going on with that, but for people watching, the birthing center at BMH is in danger of closing. There's been a great deal of community rallying behind the birthing center, all sorts of different efforts being made, including a lot by our delegation. So I think the big topic is if there's any state level context or info you guys can give us about that, and the public would be really great.
So the whole county delegation has been working together on this. We have regular meetings to strategize and to coordinate. Ian is the public face of our efforts, given that he is soon to have a baby at the birthing center, and we're very excited for him and his family. And I've been coordinating the response and coordination with other folks in the administration. And then Laura Sibilia has been doing the bulk of the comms for sort of the big group. But I just want to be really clear that no one in the Windham County legislative delegation thinks that this is just a Brattleboro issue. This is very much thought of as a full regional issue. And we've even been hearing support from our colleagues in, say, Windsor and Bennington County about how important this is for the health of our whole region. So there's quite a few different things happening simultaneously. We are in touch with the Agency of Human Services, who have a few different sources of revenue. One is sort of an emergency stabilization fund that has already given some money to BMH, but might be able to be accessed to further stabilize the birthing center. We're really working in partnership with both the hospital and the community response group on this. It's really important, I think, to remember and to recognize that no one in this community that I have spoken to wants the birthing center to close. It is considered by the hospital to be a possible fiscal reality in order to keep the entire hospital open. And they are doing everything they can to make sure that the birthing center can stay open as well. And then the second source of possible stabilization money from the Agency of Human Services is the federal rural health care grants. The request for proposals on those just closed. And the hospital should hear very soon about whether or not they are receiving that money. We think they're likely to, but there's no guarantee. And that would be many millions of dollars of federal money that the state needs to spend essentially this fiscal year. That would be transformative. All of the conversations we're having, though, are across really like a 3 to 5 year time frame. There's money that the hospital needs to see this year over the next 3 to 6 months in order to sort of do the transformative work that would be needed to close a budget gap over the next 3 to 5 years. So that is one source of stabilization money, and the second is the community fundraising that I think you all have talked about, and it's been great to even see other towns rallying around us. The hospital just sent their budget to the care board in the last couple days. That will go before the Green Mountain Care Board. There are many members of the care board and many staff at the care board that are looking very deeply into what the closure of the birthing center would mean for our region and for the health of the whole state's healthcare system, and what those costs would be to folks throughout the state. So if it costs more for a baby to be born out of state, that's something that's very important for them to take into account, and something they are taking into account. They're doing really deep analysis that I'm hoping, we're all hoping, will support the health of the birthing center and the health of the hospital and the health of everyone in this whole region, those giving birth and not. One important aspect of this is, as a legislative delegation and as a legislature, over the last 5 years, we've done so much work to expand reproductive liberty and reproductive justice in Vermont. And a lot of those freedoms and the health and safety of birthing people are at risk if folks need to give birth in a different state that does not have those same rights. And so that's an important part of this, in addition to just sort of the impact to the economy, the impact to the region demographically. So there's the work that's being done with the care board. That should be clear over the next couple weeks. And I know that John is working really closely with various community groups, as are we, to make sure that the care board is receiving the most strategic public comment that it can to support its work. And then there's sort of, if we're looking at a year into sort of the second year of funding that's needed, we would look at legislative solutions, because nothing that we can, because the legislature is not in session now, we don't have any ability to really access funds. And so our only ability to access funds would be in next year's budget adjustment and budget. That would be money that would be available in April and July. And so we're beginning work, working with the Vermont Medical Society and other partners throughout the state to say, what will it take to improve rates paid to the hospital for birthing? What will it take to shift insurance coverage? What is needed in terms of policy and ongoing and one-time money out of the state budget in order to make a difference here? There are some really great examples from Washington State that we're working with. And so we're going to be working as a whole county delegation in partnership with the Vermont Medical Society and a few other statewide partners to see what we can do to do sort of one piece of that whole puzzle. I'll stop there, but we have, I won't. We are issuing sort of regular updates from the delegation about where things are and our continued support of the issue. We've just finalized one in the last few days, and we'll all be sort of posting that in various places on social media and sending them to the paper if anyone is curious to see what's happening there.
Great, thanks, Emily. Well, any other comments from the delegation, or?
I just want to add, I appreciate the select board having the hospital board here. Was it this week or last week? I think it was last week. Because it's just really important that we stay in good communication with them so that we don't, we being all of us who care so much, that we don't do something that it does not help them or potentially injure them. So I think that's really good. I hope you continue. We're in contact with them, but that's just it's important to just remember that they are at the center. Thanks.
And John, I think it's fair to say that the Next Gen group that's working on this is in constant contact with the hospital. Yeah.
Yep.
Molly.
I would just like to acknowledge all the work behind the scenes that Emily has been doing. Really. I mean, as you can tell from her comprehensive update. So we really appreciate that.
Thanks, Molly.
I just want to commend, actually, John has also been doing an enormous amount of work behind the scenes, and I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Emily. So board, comments or questions for the delegation?
About the hospital?
About the hospital, yes. Yeah, Isaac.
Yeah, thank you so much for your work and for the updates. What can the select board do to support your efforts?
I thank you. I think the most important thing is actually to follow John's lead. In the first 2 weeks of community response, it was an incredible showing of love and support across the board, and it was really overwhelming, I think, to sort of the key stakeholders trying to do something. And so we've tried to sort of create a more strategic response with larger groups and then sort of smaller coordinating groups. And so John is really the lead, I think, on municipal response for the entire county, and is sort of the stakeholder from that. There's a stakeholder from the Next Gen group, the stakeholder from the legislative group, and actually Robin Lunge is there as part of sort of the federal response group from Peter Welch's office, as well as folks from BMH. And so that really just us being coordinated and all knowing that we each have absolutely the hospital and the birthing center at the center of our work with best intentions, I think is the most important thing we can be doing right now.
I think my only comment is the reason I don't have more questions is that all of us have been in different combinations of being in the same room on this, or phone calls and all that stuff. So I think we've all been working pretty closely, but also just to echo, thank you guys for coming together so quickly and effectively around this. Questions or comments down the line? Not seeing any, which is great. Okay, well, thank you. This is exciting. That was almost exactly 10 minutes, which would keep us more or less on track, which, having seen it in action now, I think breaks down to 5, 6, 7 minutes of comments from the delegation, about the same from the board, which may get tough as we get into some of these longer lists. But okay, so let's move on to our actual list of priorities. The first one is lower property taxes. I think sort of speaks for itself, but you can see the strategies going in a bunch of different directions. I'm curious your thoughts and also anything you can report out from the state level.
I'm going to take the lead on this one as well, but then I'll take a little break for some other priorities on the list. So the top line here of lower property taxes, the way I read this is that you are looking to have more municipal revenue so that at this sort of comparable spending levels, you would be able to lower municipal property taxes.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
generally right. The only
Okay.
the only big thing that comes to mind outside of that is if you guys could work something out on healthcare, on health insurance, that'd be great.
Thank you. Well,
Sure, no
thank you
problem.
for just dropping that one in and on the list. I appreciate it. We are actually working very hard to lower insurance costs and lower healthcare costs across the board. Access doesn't matter at all if people can't afford that access, and that is
Certainly.
something that is very important to all of us. And we actually did some great work this year, though some of it was vetoed. That might be a topic for another day. So across this whole list of sort of priorities or ideas that you've laid out, some of them are small things to like bring equity to your authority to levy fees, and we are sort of happy to work on that, and that should be a little bit of an easier lift. And then there's sort of this balancing around receiving more money from the pilot fund via pilot payments versus receiving more money from the pilot fund because there's sort of extra money considered in the pilot fund. We can only do one or the other of those things. Either there's surplus in the pilot fund we distribute, or we distribute the money from the pilot fund as pilot payments. Both of those are fine things for us to pursue. And happy to work on that in this upcoming session. One thing that we laid the groundwork for at the very end of the legislative session to pick back up this biennium is the idea of allowing some towns to do an additional local option tax amount, and that money would create additional surplus in the pilot fund that would go towards town roads and go towards town budgets. And so that's something that we might see even more action on in the coming year, and would do a lot towards your goal of having increased municipal revenue. We continue to try to find a path forward on, sometimes it's described as hub towns, sometimes it's described as, well, there's lots of ways of describing it, but making sure that the larger towns that are not sort of Burlington and are not small rural towns that serve as the center of commerce and services for an area receive the resources that they need to deliver all those services to their region. There's a really, we made some steps by getting a deep amount of analysis done last biennium on what that would look like and what best practices are in, say, New York State, Minnesota, a few other places. We have not been able yet to sort of build the political will and momentum to take that further. We are going to see change on our Government Operations Committee in the House this year, and that will likely make a big difference in our ability to affect change in that area. But we will still be operating in a fairly fiscally scarce environment as compared to the last few years, and so that will be difficult to balance, but we will do our best. And sort of part and parcel of this is the question of how pilot payments work out, how property taxes work in the context of sort of areas and communities that have more nonprofits or more services to them, and how sort of the state is responsible or not responsible for that, especially considering that the state often decides that a property is not required to pay taxes. And so the state's obligation of that is something that we would try to mix into that hub town payment, and I know it's really important to the select board. So 2 threads: expanding the amount of revenue possible into this fund that would be dispersed to towns. That is something that there is some momentum on, and we think we could maybe make action this next biennium. Changing some tiny fees, absolutely yes. That would be probably quite easy to do. Number 3, this regional hub payment thing is going to be harder to build political will, and we really need you to be working with other hub towns and have the League of Cities and Towns take a real lead on this in a meaningful way that they have not yet, in order to build enough momentum to get that done in the face of fiscal scarcity. And then the very last thing that I will say is you have a line item about road use and easy pass and things like that. I sent a memo to you, John, and then a few members of the board about, this is sort of a recurring idea that people have. It is impossible on any highway that receives federal money. And the cost of setting something like that up does not, in any analysis that I've seen, create the kind of returns that would be possible given how low the travel volume is on even our very busiest roads. So happy to share that memo more fully if folks would appreciate that. And then if anyone wants to go really deep on tolls and the infrastructure needed for tolls, there's a really great podcast about the Big Dig in Boston that like might be the best podcast about municipal and state life I've ever listened to, and I highly recommend it. And I will stop on the lower property taxes, but just, we're also, sorry, last thing. I always say there's a last thing, and then I have another one. The legislature did a tremendous amount of work and had a tremendous amount of success in rewriting our education property tax laws over the last 2 years. And in doing that, we anticipate seeing a significant reduction in the education side of the property tax ledger in 2029, fiscal year 2029. And so I know that is not like this property tax year, I know that is not next property tax year, and it might even get pushed out to fiscal year 2030, but it is like some real hope on the horizon. And I did see that my own education property taxes went down slightly this year over last year. I don't know if other folks saw that. And I know that that is not revenue for the town explicitly, but it does take some of the pressure off of the folks that are paying property taxes in town. I hope that makes some difference for people, and there will be much more progress on that in the years to come as that is fully implemented.
Great, thanks, Emily.
So that's huge, your last one. And it's also important just because sometimes residents will think that the town is the source or the reason for the property tax, for the education property tax. So that it is beneficial for the town. I just want to talk about a couple of the transportation revenue items because we found in the transportation this past year that what the state pays the towns is only 6% of what the towns need for local roads. And this is the first time that I really saw the Transportation Committee looking at these things for over many years, actually. So we're headed in the right direction. And just because we weren't able to get some things through last year, we can get them through in the future. A lot of times it takes 3 or 4 times to get something done. So the local option taxes, I think we're making good headway on that. The pilots we talked about, Emily talked about, we're certainly going to work on that more. And before I get to stormwater utilities, I just want to mention, regarding the hub towns, we're starting again the County and Regional Governance Committee. It stopped a couple of years ago, and it's going to start actually next week. And that committee could be a really good place to discuss hub towns because financial management and revenues are a focus of that study committee. And so it'll go through at least a year and possibly longer. So I'll let you know when the meetings are. I'm on that committee, and I'll let you know.
Could you talk a little bit more about what that is or what that does?
Yeah, I just want to add one detail for it before Wendy goes. So, this sort of section of your agenda is about lowering costs, increasing revenue, basically, to the municipality. The other side of that equation is lowering costs for the municipality, and I think a lot of what you're going to do in that group will lower costs for the municipality.
Yes. Well, it'll lower costs and hopefully be more efficient because we have a lot of different types of entities doing similar things, each with their own board. There's a lot of coordination that should happen. Many of these entities are from the state. Others are from the federal government. Others are just from local initiatives. So there's got to be a better way. And just as an example, and it's just one component, is the pilot project that we're doing for the sheriffs right now, because the sheriffs do they're by county, and some do some things and some do other things, and we're doing a pilot program, as I'm sure you know, in Windham County, so that we can look at ways that the sheriff can be more efficient and have lower costs and better services. So that's kind of, it's similar. And then I just want to talk about stormwater utilities, of course, and just to let you know that there's no rush to do that now. The state is going to have a model ordinance and model procedures in January of 2027. So it's good to talk about them now, just so that we can understand it, because it gets pretty complicated. But it's not necessary, and I really appreciate that it's on the board's list. But don't expect something to happen in the next year or so here. And that's a good thing, because it should take a couple of years to do this. This isn't something that you want to rush into. So that's that.
Great.
Yeah, I just very briefly, because I want to keep us on schedule, just taking a little bit of a 10,000-foot view on this. From my perspective, just after my first biennium, Vermont is moving towards regionalization in many facets. It's happening in education, it's happening in healthcare, it's happening in criminal justice. Hubtown municipal regionalization, I think, is one of those places that is going to come. Brattleboro has an opportunity to be a leader in that shift because of who we are. And so I think we can really work as partners as that's happening. I think getting VLCT on board on how to do that effectively is one way. Another way is I would really encourage the board to reach out to other hub towns, go to the VLCT town fair, meet with other chairs of boards, and find the common places where we can start to attack this issue, because I think there is going to be a groundswell, and we can help to move it. But it's a lot easier and a lot more, honestly, better legislation when we've got it coming from multiple communities across the state. And so I really encourage you, and I look forward to working with you on that, because it's a really important issue. We've been talking about it the entire time I've been in Brattleboro, but it is happening, because that's just the fiscal reality in the state.
Great. Thank you all. Questions from the board? No questions from the board. I have a couple questions. It's okay to not have questions. Yes, Amanda. Amanda is recognized.
I want to say thank you for coming, but I also want to make note, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, but John is now on the board of VLCT. Is this correct?
No, asked to be committee where they're developing their policies for the state.
Yeah, so that's really terrific. So just piggybacking on what Emily recommended, like, get involved. We have our very own town manager taking a very active role, and very thankful for that. And that's all I had to say.
Thanks. I have a couple comments and questions, just bouncing back and forth between a couple different things you brought up. I think the reason everyone's freaking out about the property tax is just because costs are high. So if there are improvements on the education side, we will all still work to keep the municipal budget down, but it will still help. Similarly, if there's anything on roads, that's been a huge pain point for us, and it's not just that it costs too much, it's that we can't even afford to do what we need to do. So that's really exciting to hear. My note wants to know if you listen to lots of municipal podcasts, or just, okay, well. And then other than that, I think the one question I have I mean, the idea of, we've talked about this a little, John, but of sort of political organizing by hub towns specifically, I think makes a lot of sense, particularly because VLCT is a great organization, but they also represent every town, and the interests of hub towns and non-hub towns will be a little bit in conflict when we're talking about the money involved. So that's a good reminder, and we should, definitely move that forward. Other questions, comments from the board?
I'd love to talk more about the stormwater utilities, given that that's something that we said as a board that would be a priority for us for the coming months. I'm wondering if that's something that we would want to find a time with Wendy to talk about another juncture.
That would be great. Yes, so at another meeting.
Yeah, we can, that's a great idea. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to mention, you guys alluded to it, but you had full success in moving the local option tax distribution and getting the town more of that money. So that's something that's changed very recently that has been a big help. Okay, well,
I've got a.
Yeah, please.
So, I'm sort of focusing in and seeing what's happened to us over the course of the last few years as this designated hub town, and the additional expense heaped onto us as a municipality, and then this whole BMH thing sort of happened, and I had, unfortunately, an opportunity to take myself to the emergency room, and sort of see how our emergency room at BMH is turned into for lack of a better term, like sort of a healthcare facility that is not by design to deal with like mental health crises or, for whatever reason, the police bringing them in and dropping them off. Also seeing that kind of leaning on us as a municipality, and then further seeing that sort of thing leaning on our regional hospital, right? And so I don't have an answer. It's kind of a statement. If you can help kind of clarify this to me, and like, how can we mitigate this? I know that like with the motel program, like the state pays X for a room. We don't recoup any of that. So that's the hardship. The hospital has to deal with some of the same population. That's a hardship. Like, where does helping stop helping?
So I think we actually saw each other in the emergency room sometime this year.
That was the same day.
Yeah. So that was unfortunate.
Yeah.
Though I always like seeing you.
Let's keep that in mind.
So.
Everyone's okay?
All good. I didn't make it.
The select board killed you a long time ago.
So there's a lot in what you said. So there's a number of pilots happening around the state in urgent mental health care, in order to take urgent, I don't know how to put those words in the right order, but urgent care for behavioral and mental health issues, out of emergency rooms and into more appropriate places for those people to actually get the care that they need. And so that is happening and will likely be expanded as we see success. It was prioritized for places that don't even have emergency rooms, because as hard as things seem sometimes here, they are genuinely harder in other places. There are places where someone calls 911 and no one comes in this lovely state. So that will likely be expanded as we see success. The retreat has expanded its transfer services in partnership with the state and with Rescue. Not to talk about Rescue at the select board meeting, but that's what's happening. And, sorry, that was a joke for you, Ian. And so that is also happening. That also makes a big difference in moving people out of emergency rooms into safer, more appropriate care settings. With regards to the incredible toll that homelessness has on the people who are homeless, the support systems for folks who are homeless, and our whole community, we, this last year, passed a piece of legislation that was remarkably similar to legislation we had passed the year before, This year, the governor signed it into law that essentially remakes our entire homelessness response continuum to actually make it a continuum of care so that folks are supported to find housing and to stay in housing, and once they're in housing, to have that housing be stabilized in a way that is designed to continue to reduce reliance on the motel system without increasing the amount of folks who are living on the streets and homeless, which is both worse for people and an even higher cost to municipalities. And so all of that is happening in that piece of legislation. There is actually money paying directly to towns to support any response services that are needed at the municipal level. I'm sure not at the cost that would be ideal, but that is a piece of that legislation that was championed by your delegation quite explicitly for inclusion in that bill. And so that is sort of a few things that we're doing in response to all of that. But these are massive societal challenges that towns and cities all across the entire country are reckoning with. And we are one little place that is feeling that challenge, and this is what we're doing to respond to it.
Thank you.
If I can also, can I also mention something? The police liaisons that are embedded in different police departments. I know Brattleboro PD has one. These folks from HCRS who are responding to different incidents. On the one hand, it takes part of the burden off of law enforcement, but it also connects that particular individual who's going through some sort of crisis with a mental health care worker right then and there. And sometimes it may lead to a trip to the emergency room, but other times it might lead to, having that conversation with the HCRS worker, getting them regulated, and then having a follow-up meeting and, getting them on a path to get the help they need rather than going to the emergency room. So over the years, that has expanded across the state, which has been great, and I'm glad to see it.
Thanks, Nader.
Oscar?
Yes.
Amanda?
Oh, yes, Amanda. Thanks, Seth.
Thank you, Seth. I just had a follow-up question for what Emily mentioned. The retreat transfer services are from an ER to where? And are the services regional or statewide? And are they receiving state dollars? Is the retreat receiving state dollars to do this transfer services?
The retreat receives lots of state dollars for care, and I don't have the details in front of me of how their billing works, whether it's per bed or per patient or per transfer. I can follow up with you. It's somewhere deep inside my computer. But the pilot for transferring is actually from the retreat to other mental health care places and from other hospitals to the retreat. But it's mostly hospital, like mental hospital to mental hospital. And it helps free up space at the retreat or free up space in other hospitals as needed. It is not a local pilot. It is a statewide pilot. So it's not about BMH and the retreat specifically. It's about making the retreat function as efficiently and effectively as it can so that beds are being used as efficiently and effectively as possible at the retreat in order to make the entire mental health system of care in the state work well. And I'm sure someone from the retreat could come to the board and talk more about that better than I can. I'm reflecting a 30-minute conversation I had 6 months ago.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
All right, let's forge ahead. I think that was our longest topic, so that's a good sign. Moving ahead to...
Oh, and I've covered number 1.
Great. Oh, yeah. So moving ahead to housing, these are much more general strategies, and I think I wouldn't be out of line if I said that the board thinks that this is something that we all know is actively being worked on in a bunch of different places, and we want to see that expand and continue as much as possible. But, yeah, so anything state level we should know, or responses to any of these particular bullets?
I'll start, and this will be a very much of an overview.
Yeah.
The Home Act, which we did before we did Act 181, was the legislation that was most impactful to housing of towns. or by towns because it changed the zoning and other aspects of towns and what towns could do and what they couldn't do and what they must do. So, for example, I hope everybody knows this, but anywhere that a single-family home is allowed, a duplex is allowed throughout the state, and even if the town hasn't done that yet. So I'm sure that we've. I'm just looking at Brian. Sorry. I'm sure that the town has used that. And Brattleboro, as you know, has had is really a success story in housing. The first year that we started, after we had made the changes, Brattleboro had more permits than any year since 1987. And I'm believing that we have had, now we don't have just permits, we have housing built. I don't know those stats, but your staff can get them to you. So Brattleboro has just been a really good place for that. I could talk about the changes to 181 if you like. It's not hugely impactful to Brattleboro, so I won't unless you want me to. But one thing that I do, you have further limit appeals of housing projects within Tier 1, and we did do that to the extent that we were able to, because there are constitutional issues of going farther. And so the most egregious aspect was appeals that are for the character of the community, because that's kind of that's a word in podcasts, I'm sure. That is, it singles that we don't want certain people here. It suggests that we don't want certain people here, and so we removed that as a justification for an appeal, because we could cite problems with that. But other than that, I'm not aware of any other appeal that we can take away, but we're happy to look at it.
And I think there's a feeling that housing is loosening up a little bit in town. Like, we're starting to see the first signs of that, so that's encouraging.
And then,
No,
sorry,
go
no,
ahead.
go.
Well, just to that point, and I should have said that, at SevEds, we look at trends, obviously, and the housing market is balancing, yes, so that we're at like the 40 position, where 50 is exactly balanced between the seller and the buyer, and so we're within 10 points of that, so which is really good.
And I'm assuming that the 40, we are on the side of balance towards the sellers still?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
and then in terms of continuing to make funds available for housing, a lot of the recent money available for housing was federal money, and federal situation is something everyone knows about, and I don't need to tell you about. But in the midst, as sort of that was ending, we created new space. We've had a statutory provision for funds going to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board towards new housing for decades, and we increased that statutory percentage through a change in the property transfer tax 3 years ago that will create significantly more money going towards housing projects all over the state, and certainly we have seen returns on that here. And I believe there's going to be a ribbon cutting in September in Putney for significantly more housing, which makes a big difference in our housing market as well. And so that's really exciting. I also want to put in a plug. The Southeast Vermont Housing Coalition does some really amazing work. I know John is a regular attendee there. I know Sue is a regular attendee there and a big part of progress, and really, encourage select board members to attend as well.
Great, thank you. Questions from the board?
I have a niche question that, Wendy, you might not know. There's also a right to ADU, right? In addition to a right to duplex. But for limiting the appeal for like a character of a neighborhood, does that intersect with like heritage districts? Like, could you limit, does it limit the appeal for that facade, you know, needs, the first story of the facade needs to be in line with the historic facades?
No, it's a different item. This appeal would be if someone didn't want, you know, if they're going to court over.
I know what you were
yeah,
saying.
But
yeah,
historic, for a building that is historic, and for it to comply with all the historic regulations, this would not impact that.
but if a building were going up, you know, if people basically, something happened and a building had been torn down, or there was an open space and a building was going up in a heritage district, I guess is what I'm curious about, because that's still character, but it's very different than the character that's being talked about.
That is a good question, and I
Yeah.
can see people arguing that. So
Yeah.
I will find out more and see if they are. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Other comments from the board?
I was speaking with one of your colleagues in Montpelier recently, who was saying that she had suggested to the governor that he might consider deploying the Vermont National Guard to build and create housing because of there being a housing shortage and a crisis, and that this would be an appropriate use of the Guard because this is a crisis that we face with not enough housing. I don't believe that she received a favorable response from the governor to this idea, but I'm curious about what big, bold ideas could be pursued to adequately address the housing shortage that we have right now. It feels like these are really important things that you're doing at work, and it also feels like tinkering a little bit around the edges of a massive crisis that we've been experiencing for many years. And I know, Emily, you introduced some legislation a while ago that passed the House around the 10-year housing plan. Curious, like what would be sort of a vision for the future around this?
So big, bold legislation generally does not happen in a divided government. It's, I think, to some degree why people like divided government, but it's also one of the things that makes divided government difficult, and that's the situation that we're operating in, both, you know, in Vermont right now. We did pass 3 years ago, the House passed a really comprehensive package to build a sufficient amount of housing over 10 years. That did not make it through the Senate. And likely will not get picked up again until we have a very different makeup of House, Senate, and administration. What we have done, actually, in collaboration with the administration, that is not, you know, flashy, but, and nor would I describe it as bold, but it does actually make a really big difference for much less money than some other housing that's developed, which is invest in really significant ways in manufactured housing, both the construction of manufactured, off-site manufactured construction housing, building out Vermont's capacity to set up that kind of development at 2 different locations. We gave the Treasurer's Office a very specific lending authority to support the construction of off-site manufactured housing. And then we asked the administration to coordinate across multiple agencies to better prepare sites to receive manufactured housing so that the Agency of Transportation and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development could work together to prepare pads for housing, to build out roads for housing. There's significant money that went to Tri-Park here in Brattleboro to make sure that the bridge, in collaboration with the town, was strong enough to bring new housing over the bridge. Scott Sharland, who actually lives in Brattleboro but works for the Department of Housing and Community Development, could come talk to you about this more. But in doing that, we have really dispersed a hugely significant amount of manufactured housing all through the state, including in Brattleboro, that is making a difference in the housing crisis and is a home ownership opportunity for folks who would otherwise not be able to access home ownership. There's also a lot of lending authority with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency that's tied into it. So it really is a whole of government approach to both the development and creation, the financing, the ownership, and sort of the land access for manufactured housing. And that's a really exciting thing that we've done over the last 3 years that I did not mention at all before. So I'm sorry. Thank you for asking the question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
I was kind of curious. I was listening to various podcasts today and ahead of this, and is that people were mentioning that there were something like 2 or 3 abandoned mobile home facilities that they were looking at opening back up. That's what you're talking about. And they had noted, like, just for your interest, because of like the amount of transportation cost, the amount of cost for a manufactured home that was coming from transportation out of state, right? Yeah, and there's also some really cool, like more net zero, more energy efficient manufactured house models that exist in Vermont, like new frameworks up in Burlington is really cool.
So the new housing that was just delivered to Mountain Home to cover the homes that had been lost in Hurricane Irene were just delivered a couple weeks ago, thanks to really the town's, also the town, lots of partners, but including the town's support for building that, for taking over the ownership of that bridge. Those homes are all net zero homes, and so are like safe and warm and are going to be really incredibly inexpensive to maintain for the folks living there. It's really exciting. And I know that also there's lots of other fun net zero stuff happening at Mountain Home, thanks to the Energy Committee.
Great. Thanks, Emily. I'd like to move us ahead so we can.
Can I?
Of course.
This is probably just getting a little granular, but I kind of didn't listen to a podcast, did my own research, and kind of came up with some numbers in Brattleboro. I don't know how accurate they are, but like there were like 63 available apartments, 45 available homes for sale, and I know that that number is nice when you add them together, but when nobody can afford to move into them. So is this more of a thing trying to maybe get housing costs back down to an affordable level? I mean, is that, I don't know how we do that. I'm wondering if we actually have this crisis of no housing, or if we just have a crisis of housing nobody can afford.
I think it's all the things. So there is housing, there's folks who want to move out of a much larger home and move into a smaller home that actually just don't have access to any housing, let alone housing they can afford. So say older Vermonters whose kids have left home, right, and have, say, a 4-bedroom house. So there's no sort of appropriate housing. There is housing is too expensive, and our housing market is driven up by second homes and vacation home buyers, right? And so the legislature is doing a lot about that with tax policy that we're not going to get into here. So we're trying to address that part of the problem. There is, over the last 30 years, the federal government has really significantly defunded sort of public and affordable housing. And so that's something that the state is recently partnering with the housing partnerships and housing authorities in a way that they never have before to make sure that they stay supported in the face of federal cuts. So that makes a big difference in sort of, really below market rent housing. And so it's all of those different factors all at once, and we're trying to get at every different piece of the root cause, but it's a lot to do all at once, and it's been 50 years in the making, and we're all just grappling with it. And I think your planning department is really at the front lines of all of that and are probably a better resource than we are on what needs to happen next.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right, now I'd like to move us forward, keep that momentum going, and we'll move on to promote public safety. And Ian and Nodder, I suspect, but all are welcome.
Great, thank you. So I can start off and talk about the accountability docket here in Brattleboro. So that's been going for about 3 weeks now. And for folks who may not know my job outside of the legislature, I work as a defense attorney. So I have clients both in the criminal docket and the accountability docket. It's going really well. As of today, there have been 51 cases that have been resolved. And one, I want to make the distinction as to, what is the criminal docket and what is the accountability docket. When we're talking about the criminal docket, it's much more, it moves much more slowly compared to the accountability docket. And due to a variety of factors over the last 10 years or so, there has been an increasing backlog in all of the counties in the state. And the accountability docket has been one of the strategies used to resolve many of these cases that have been contributing to that backlog. And basically, an individual defendant in the accountability docket is required to come in pretty much once a week, which compared to the criminal docket, somebody's coming in once every 3 months or so. In the accountability docket, we also have HCRS literally in the courtroom and working I want to say across the aisle almost, but, working with the defendant, but also, providing updates as to what progress looks like for that particular defendant. And the frequency in which defendants have to come to court and the consistent exposure to whatever resources they might need is really helping folks moving along and resolving their cases, but also, addressing that accountability piece as well, because that, accountability, there's, it means, in my opinion, not just taking responsibility, but also trying to figure out, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? And, sometimes that looks like going to rehab, sometimes it looks like anger management, and, sometimes it's a combination of, all sorts of different factors. So, the only complaint that I've been seeing and hearing about is the resources for the attorneys themselves, because, we did get the resources from AHS, and, HCRS is helping out a ton, but, the attorneys are basically having to be in two places at once, and while it's resolving many cases, it is also just takes a lot of time to be both in the criminal docket and the accountability docket at the same time. And if you're in court all day, almost every day, that's time away from being able to actually review the case, develop a strategy, and figure out what the best approach is. So, but again, overall, it's going really well, and I'm glad we finally have something like that down here in Brattleboro.
I just want to add to it. Do we come to you guys after the session to talk about this already?
No, we didn't do that.
I can't possibly
We did
remember
not.
something
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that.
so just very briefly, so this is a pretty new idea. It was implemented in Chittenden County last winter in December of 2025. They came back to us in the legislature, reported its effectiveness. It was rolled out ineffectively in Rutland. Then the legislature, you all wrote a letter. We worked really hard to get this into Brattleboro. It's a 90-day program, and it's, if it's rolled out effectively, it can really help to alleviate these individuals who have a significant number of dockets. And that helps everybody because, Nader was alluding to it, but, when you've got somebody who has multiple pending criminal charges and it's not being addressed quickly, they can rack up more as they violate conditions of release. And those are new additional criminal charges. And so it's good for the state. And it's, in my opinion, it can be good for defendants, and it gets accountability and rehabilitation because the reality is that delayed justice really hurts every party and the community. So I just wanted to just frame that, and I think the other part of it, and this will address another point here, is this is a refreshing thing for criminal justice in Vermont, that we're looking at new approaches to try to address these issues. That's not just we need more judges, we need more prosecutors, and we need more defense attorneys, because that's still true, but that's not enough. Just like throwing money at the problem doesn't quite fully address because there are a lot of underlying issues. And the accountability docket, one of the things it does is bringing all those resources into the courtroom, and that's actually proven to be something that's really critical because once you leave the courtroom as a defendant, if you don't have the support systems in place to get you to those resources, then you are just falling through the system again. And so I think I think it's really encouraging. I think it probably speaks to number 2 here, which I'll definitely pass back to Nader. But like the judiciary, the state's attorneys, the defense bar are all, there's like a new energy to start looking at more creative ways to address this stuff. So I think that's hopeful. But that said, this will be all done. Nader will thankfully get to sleep a little bit more in 65 days or something?
65 days.
Yeah.
Who's counting?
Yeah, no, thanks for that follow-up. I mean, what I've heard often from both judges and prosecutors is that, it's when it comes to public safety, it's not about, well, you're not necessarily going to see results if you're just increasing the punitive aspect of an offense. So, for example, if somebody is contemplating burglarizing an occupied home, the maximum penalty is 20 years in jail. You know, if we were to change the law and say, all right, the maximum penalty is now 25 years, they're probably not going to have a change of heart just because we went from 20 years to 25 years. However, you know, individuals who do get charged with an offense, if they are resolving their cases in a much shorter time frame rather than having them drawn out for 5 or 6 years, you know, again, just getting back to Ian's point, you know, that shows that accountability is swift, and also shows that individuals who are amenable to treatment are going to be able to, you know, get the services they need. So, so the next piece there I see is that the addition of a standing drug docket in Brattleboro, and I think that kind of goes in hand with the accountability docket that we have. You know, it's not particularly far off with what we're doing right now. You know, right now there is the drug docket in Windsor that is accessible to Wyndham defendants, but oftentimes people who are struggling with substance use are unlikely going to be able to make it up to Windsor County or White River Junction on a frequent basis because, you know, reliable transportation can be hard to come by. So, so regarding the drug docket, you know, I think, you know, getting back to the point of just having a creative and dynamic approach in general, I think the judiciary is increasingly open to that.
And I'll just add, you know, Nutter's been working on having a standing drug docket in Windham County for 8 years now. And I say that not to say that you've been like trying and we haven't had it yet, but to say like how incredibly long it takes to make progress on some of these thorny issues, particularly with the judiciary, given that it's a totally different branch of government that we can't actually command to do things. And the work that I've seen you do on the accountability docket with stakeholders, I've heard from more and more stakeholders that they understand how absurd the barriers to a Windham County drug docket is in a way that us just telling them before didn't work. And now they're being shown that those barriers are minimal to a standing drug docket. And so it seems to me that the opportunities for that are much greater in the years ahead because of all the work that you've done on the accountability docket.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I'm going to take a moment to speak about the addiction treatment piece. So Vermont was a national leader when we created the hub and spoke model, and that was a really long time ago. And it has not been updated. We have done a lot of work to extend addiction treatment opportunities. We have a very comprehensive system of we have very comprehensive opportunities for job training, though I do not know if I would describe it as a system. And we have a lot of opportunities for supportive housing. All of those things, 3 things integrated into a comprehensive system of care is something we do not have. And I am hopeful that in this upcoming biennium, as we see a change in leadership in the House, that we will see a change in jurisdiction of committees. The issue of substance use is one that sits between our Human Services Committee and our Healthcare Committee. Both of those committees are very, very busy with homelessness and childcare on sort of the side of the Human Services Committee, or on our healthcare, all of our other healthcare affordability or access challenges on the healthcare side. And so substance use often sort of falls between the cracks, even though it is the most pressing issue in many of our communities. And so I'm hopeful with a change in leadership, we can see a change in jurisdiction and a renewed focus on this, because it is an incredibly pressing issue for so many of our communities, particularly for hub towns. And so I really encourage, as you work with other communities on the hub town issue, that this issue of a systemic system of care for substance use is one that's included. Usually in the legislature, the issue of substance use and substance use treatment in very rural areas gets a lot of attention because there's just nothing right now. Or in Chittenden County and Burlington area, there actually is a system of care. and that is just funded because it's an existing system of care. And so this need to sort of remake the hub and spoke is one that is really an issue for hub towns, and I really hope we can all work together on that.
Thanks, delegation as a whole. I want to bring it back to the board for questions.
Do you want to? So
Do you want to touch on 4?
We can touch on 4 and
Yeah.
5. So very quickly on 4. So this was a bill that was introduced last session. It was a little bit of a pet project of mine. Very disappointingly, it got all the way to the so passed out of the House, and it went to the Senate, and it was still in a omnibus landlord-tenant bill that then died on the House floor at a split vote. Or I'm sorry, the Senate floor on a split vote with the lieutenant governor voting against it and breaking the tie. So that said, I am encouraged by the work that was done on it when I kind of left the cradle of my work on it to be worked on by lots of different other very capable people. So there's been a lot of talk around it already. So I'm hoping to reintroduce it with others, and also have already started conversations about how to have a more effective housing landlord-tenant bill as far as how to move it through the legislative bodies. I don't think I'm talking out of class to say that we bit off a little bit more than I think we could chew with how large that last bill was, and that I think partially led to its ultimate demise. So I think there are a couple of different strategies that we can work on to try to get something that's in committees that can move this stuff forward in an effective way. So, more to come on it, but that's kind of the update now. And then the last one, I just want to...
Ian, can you just say, for people who are watching online and don't have access to this document, what you numbered them, but if you could just say what they say.
This one was allow property owners of multi-unit housing to trespass people threatening or engaging in illegal behavior while strengthening renters' rights. So that's like kind of a broader, little more vague sort of issue, description of sort of an issue, which was like, how do we address this problem when you've got a problematic person who's in a multi-unit building who's not a tenant, and maybe the tenant is really scared of them, but they don't have the ability to trespass them on their own. Currently, that's a gap in the law. Where there isn't really an ability to address that issue. There are a lot of concerns around addressing that effectively, because you can't push the spectrum too far in the direction of letting landlords trespass anybody, because that would be unconstitutional and lots of other problems. But where we're at now is also hurting everybody who are in those buildings, not just the tenant that's there, but other people who are living there. So, and we heard a lot of testimony in committee about that. And so I think there's a lot of energy there, but again, it didn't make it all the way. And then very quickly, Oscar, I realized,
Sure.
So the supplementing Medicaid payments, I think expanding Medicaid payments is a huge issue that hits a lot of things that are on this list. One that I want to just put out into the world is that we did a lot of work this year on competency restoration, which has to do with like an individual who's found non-competent. In the current system, they kind of drop through the criminal justice system. There's no way to restore competency in Vermont. There are ways to do it in other states. One of the issues there is that Medicaid doesn't reimburse the Department of Mental Health the same way that we need them to, so that they can qualify individuals for the types of mental health issues that they're having in the state, so that they can actually be worked with DMH. And so it's addiction treatment, but it's also mental health treatment where Medicaid is far behind what we need, and it's hurting Vermont. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
Thanks, Ian. So let me just...
I also just want to be a voice of negativity to just prepare everyone. Medicaid is already an incredibly problematic issue to try to improve under this federal administration, and it's about to get significantly more difficult. We have funded a network of community partners, including our community action agencies, to support folks who are struggling with Medicaid access right now. to complete paperwork, to stay enrolled. And it's going to be a significant source of tension between Vermont's government and the federal administration to make sure that we are keeping Medicaid payments as flexible and at the scale that is needed to actually compensate for care. But it is sort of a major policy battleground area.
Yeah.
And so as much as we need to expand Medicaid payments for our emergency services, for mental health services, for birthing services, we are probably likely to be incredibly lucky to even hold the line on what our current ability to spend there is.
Thanks, Emily. So just as chair, real quick, I knew this discussion was going to run over. It's fine that it has. There's a lot of really valuable stuff being talked about. I think if we aim to run half an hour over, that's good. I don't really want to go an hour plus over time. We have 2 more items on this list: select board comments on public safety, quick check-in about the charter, and then public comment. So if everyone can bear that in mind and we try to fit that into 30 minutes, if we have to go a little longer, that's okay. But yeah, board comments.
Yeah, so this should only take about 20, 25 minutes.
Okay, great.
Just two points of clarification. One to Emily. I'm assuming that this difficulty that we're going to feel from a federal level is part of the big, bad, beautiful bill, whatever. Okay, yep. Just wanted to make sure that that was out there in the ethos. And more to come on that. From what I understand, these cuts are just starting to roll out this year, and they are going to get progressively worse. So vote. The second point of clarification, and if I understood Ian correctly, was on the allowing property owners of multi-use housing to trespass people threatening or engaging in illegal behavior while strengthening renters' rights. Our current lieutenant governor in office now was the tie-breaking vote on the Senate floor.
Yeah. Oh, you were there.
Yeah, I happened to be there, and yes, it was the lieutenant governor voted no, and that was the tie-breaking vote.
So there again, just another reason to vote. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Other comments or questions? Nell and then Amanda.
I was just curious, so we have 90 days with the current, what, is it a trial? It's, a pilot?
Accountability docket, yeah.
Yeah. What's the timeline after that for gauging success?
Do you so 2 things. It's not a trial. It's just like the program is 90 days. It's like a plug and play on this issue. Like this thing goes in, it comes into a community. We in the legislature we actually built sort of like the structure for how this is implemented. It didn't have that when it was in Chittenden County, and then we saw it kind of get rolled out in Rutland. And the issue here is that judiciary, state's attorneys, defense attorneys, the administration all have their hands in this pie. And if it's not sort of legislated out, like this is what you have to do, these are the resources that need to be brought to it, it didn't really work. So we really made it much more structured, but it's still like this is something that is dropped into a community with the resources available to address these very specific types of cases, and then it leaves. So the question as to how is that measured, that is something that I think you could honestly ask that still about Chittenden County as to its effectiveness. So these longer term questions around individuals who reoffend, whether the docket has been reduced, it takes time to sort of see. The one thing that is true with Chittenden County, and I think we're already seeing in Brattleboro and Windham County, is that the immediate relief that the docket sees, where these cases are just getting moved off, like they're being resolved, is happening. But the bigger question, and the one that I'm really curious about, is are we going to see those individuals back in the criminal justice system again, but just now they won't have a brand new set of dockets.
Yeah, the backlog will just creep up again.
And it won't necessarily creep up again, but it could. But there is a lead from the Agency of Human Services. Her name's Nicole, who's working on these dockets. She's actually in town every Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I think she would probably be happy to come here and talk to you about it in greater detail. And she is collecting a great deal of process data on how well it's working, and has a pretty comprehensive answer for what comes next.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also wanted to add the presiding judge also gets the opportunity to see what is working and what's not working. And from what I gathered today, at least what was sort of hinted at, is that, what the judiciary is learning from this with how it's working in Brattleboro is going to help inform decisions later on, because they have the flexibility to be more dynamic with how they're hearing cases, and if they're going to make additional requests to have HCRS in the courtroom in the future. So that's not to say that's definitely going to happen, but it's what was hinted at, I'll say.
Thanks. Seth, let's go to Amanda.
Hi. My question is also about the accountability docket, and I'm wondering about the resources allocated to Department of Corrections, and especially with parole officers, because as people are moving through the system, those parole officers are really important people in their lives, and the accountability piece. And I wonder how that's tying into the accountability docket.
Yep. Folks who may get put on probation as a result of resolving their case. We have a really wonderful probation and parole office down here with POs who really care about their jobs and the people that they're supervising. So, but I mean, like pretty much every government agency, it is an agency that is overworked, and they could use more staff and more resources. But from what I hear and what I see myself, we have a great probation office with great officers, and there's a lot of work that they have to do, but they're doing good work.
Great. Thanks, everyone. We're at the end of a topic. I'd like to give everyone a chance to stop talking for a few minutes, so I'm going to say let's take 7.5 minute recess and come back.
Yeah.
You don't want to push through?
We've got 2 or 3 more to go.
Okay.
Let's take a few minutes, come back at 8 and finish up. Thank you, everyone. Select boards and town managers. Oh, okay. So I was already. All right, we're gonna watch Netflix. Everybody.
Nice.
Oh, wow. Pink Panther.
Hey, I hear season 3 of Ted Lasso's out. Let's do that. Yeah,
Really?
yeah. I think it came out, I think today.
Oh, this is much more exciting.
Oh, Ted Lasso?
All right, for anyone on Zoom, we were watching Netflix by mistake for a minute.
I know. The British people got it first.
And do we still have Amanda, Seth?
Are we?
It's good.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I know about it.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We're gonna pick up with our legislative liaison. Is that what it is? Great. And we will start with prioritize transportation, our 4th priority. 4 strategies on here, but really interested to hear what you guys have to share.
Okay, so all this really relates to funding. And as you know, the transportation fund is not enough to fund what we need. And a lot of that has to do with, over the years, cars are getting better gas mileage and the gas tax is not bringing in enough. So so one of the strategies for that from the agency is to do a mileage-based user fee. And they're starting it out just with electric vehicles, which is a little controversial because, with the eventual aim of covering all vehicles. But all the kinks are not worked out in the mileage-based user fee, and I think a lot of people felt like, why didn't we just do a pilot? Why are we just, going for this? And we had been paying electric vehicles, because electric vehicles were not paying their full fair share until we reached a certain level. We sort of got to that level, not quite, and when they represented 15% of the fleet. And they started, electric vehicles have been paying a double registration fee, and that money has gone towards charging in multi-unit dwellings. So I think everybody felt good about that, paying for that we paying an extra fee and knowing that it was going towards sort of helping the landscape of helping other people who live in multi-unit dwellings buy an electric vehicle, or at least one. So that's one thing that's happening. There has been a total inability to raise revenue because of the administration. I think the last time we raised the gas tax was it 2013? I think, and there was a Republican chair of the House Transportation when we did that, and we were able to sell that. And certainly, gas tax is also regressive, so there's that issue. We've had a number of studies over the years on public transit and on transportation funding in general that propose different taxes, like ad valorem tax or tax on, bigger vehicles, et cetera. And of course, these studies get done, they get paid for, and nothing happens, which has been my big frustration, particularly with public transit, is that, they come out with very specific things, like you could do a delivery fee, or delivery fee plus this, plus that. This is how much money it would bring in, but we just haven't been able to move on that.
However, can I talk about the purchase and use tax for a
Yeah,
moment?
yeah.
So on item 3, you have direct the full purchase and use tax on motor vehicles to the state transportation fund. If we did that just wholesale, while it would put more money into the state transportation fund, it would just serve to increase property taxes in the education fund. And so, because that's where the other portion of the purchase and use tax goes. And the education fund fully funds schools, and any remaining revenue that's needed to fully fund schools comes from the property tax. So just transferring would probably not have the impacts that are desired. However, at the very end of the biennium, we were able to find, through changes in corporate tax revenue, an additional $10 and then $20 million to put into the general fund, which was then moved some revenue into the education fund. And then in doing that, we were able to move an additional $20 million into the transportation fund via the purchase and use tax. So we have covered that partially, and that was a huge step forward. We do plan to continue doing that, but we need to do it in a way that replaces the revenue that's being pulled, because otherwise we will increase property taxes on Vermonters, and I don't think any of us are looking for that. And so that additional $20 million in the transportation fund should make a big difference, particularly on the town roads fund, which is a big priority of the House Transportation Committee and the Senate.
Yeah. So that, you know, that is good news for the transportation fund. Whether eventually the MBUF, mileage-based user fee, will be able to, you know, really bring in enough revenue remains to be seen. But that's down the line. So I think, you know, we need some extra income. I love the fact that you want to fully fund the transportation programs according to need with a focus on bus, train, bicycle, and pedestrian enhancements. That's great. The other sort of thing lurking in the background is if the Congress ever gets around to reauthorizing the transportation bill, which is going to expire September 30th, I think, and they'll probably just do a continuing resolution. Those are not going to be the priorities. So we have these enhancement grants that have been funded, sidewalks and, you know, other kinds of bike and pedestrian things. So that remains to be seen, what's going to happen there. And diversified state transportation fund revenue sources. That's, you know, so that's what needs to happen. I think going for excess weight permit fees is a good idea, I think, and Wendy, and I'm not going to be able to introduce any legislation that I might want to, but Wendy can, and we can see what we might be able to do in terms of, and I think also, you know, the conversation has really started more. I think towns are getting more vocal about the sort of paltry percentage the towns get vis-a-vis the state. And, you know, we did put an inflator in the town highway aid, 6 or 7 years ago. We tried to increase the structures program and the Class 2 roadway, but it's not really enough. So I think that could also be a conversation about the balance, the percentage balance between town and state roads. So I think that's sort of the big picture.
Thanks,
I'm
Molly.
trying to think of anything exciting. You know, we did have these great incentives for electric vehicles with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act money. That was great. It was a really exciting time. A lot of people, especially very low-income people, were able to buy electric vehicles and cut their transportation costs quite a bit. And so if we're talking about affordability, those are things that, you know, if we keep people dependent upon buying, you know, gas-powered vehicles, people's transportation cost, you know, obviously with the price of gas right now. So that would be great if we had money for that, but we don't. So anyway.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things. So not having money for things is a choice that the administration has made. And unfortunately, we don't have a good way to value transportation except if you are in our last few conversations, we've been talking about how it's been, people don't have transportation to get to the drug docket. So there are benefits to transportation that are not being counted now, that we just assume that they can't get there, and oh, what a shame. So we need to find better ways or just understand the value, and then increasing and diversifying revenue sources. I completely agree with you on that, and again, the administration has chosen not to use a mechanism. There's a bonding capability for transportation that they have not been using. And so they're going to look at using it again next year. We put that in the bill. That's really important, and it's an obvious thing to do. So just one good news item on transportation is that we do have a very robust level 3 charging system on our highways and on our other important roads like Route 7 that are not highways in Vermont. We're doing really well on that.
I just saw there's a new charging station at the Brattleboro Co-op that I hadn't realized. I don't even know when
Yeah.
that was put in,
Yeah.
but that was
Yeah.
very exciting.
Yeah.
The big box.
I don't know if
And
it's a
we have
level 2 or
4
level
big-
3, I'm not sure.
I think it was a 3-year.
Yeah.
Well, great.
Tell your friends that are visiting from out of town.
Yeah.
And there's a Bank of Rivian chargers up on Canal Street.
And by 99, yeah, there's a lot of chargers, which is great.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right, board, questions, comments?
Yeah, good?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, I know that the local option tax was brought up a little earlier with regards of the possibility of adding one, did I under?
Increasing it.
Increasing it. And that would be on goods, on basically goods sold, taxable items sold?
So the Stowe passed a charter change last year to increase their local option tax to their local option sales and meals and rooms tax to 2% from 1%, which is not something that is authorized in state law. So if the legislature approves that charter, it's sort of creating a new precedent for the level of local option tax that is allowable under state law. And so that the House moved that charter change in the hopes of creating some more space for municipalities by creating that precedent. The local option gas tax idea that was discussed last time is not implementable because gas is not, the gas tax is not levied at the station level, it's levied at the supplier level. And so the infrastructure that would need to be set up for a local option gas tax would have no guarantee of ever being paid for because a local option tax happens in sort of bits and drabs as each town digs into it. And so that did not, that proposal did not move forward because it wouldn't, it was just not implementable because.
It was going to be about
So-
$1 million or something, wasn't it? Yeah.
You may have already answered the question I was going to ask. It wasn't so much about implementing a larger local option tax, but personally speaking, like I can tear that one apart. But can we take the local option tax that we have now and apply it to the sale of gasoline and diesel fuel?
No.
And that's without sort of a complete rework of how that tax is assessed.
Yeah,
right?
it's just like, it's really not, it's just not a feasible thing to do.
And it sounded like you were saying that is because the tax is not collected sort of at the point of
It's not collected
sale?
at the point of sale, so most sales taxes are considered trust taxes, and they're collected by the seller at the point of sale. And so they're retained at that local level before they're then, moved to the state or wherever it coffers. The gas tax is collected at the supplier level. And so where that sort of the scale of that is not even fully tracked anywhere. And the taxes are, those gas taxes are collected by the Agency of Transportation and not the tax department, which is like, all of those I understand seem like solvable problems. Absolutely. However, to solve that problem, you are going to spend more money solving the problem than the tax would actually collect. And for a local option tax in particular, because a local option tax is voted on locally, the infrastructure would need to be set up in advance of that opportunity to levy that tax. But there would be no guarantee of any revenue whatsoever on that tax when it was set up by the state, because no municipalities would have voted on it yet, and you would have no idea of the scale of revenue that it would bring in. And so it would be setting up infrastructure for, it's like what's that, Field of Dreams? I bet you like that movie.
Build it and they will come.
Yes.
See, that's from a Canadian.
You don't like that movie? You should, that seems like a movie.
Do I
we'd
not like that movie, please?
Okay, see, I knew it. Okay, great.
That's a different agenda.
Okay.
All right.
So, so it's just not, it's, there's this very annoying legislative expression of is the juice worth the squeeze? And on this, it is not. And so no, the answer is just no.
John?
But there are like so many other fun taxes that you can find.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to tax our people, but, you know, they're just, I don't know. I guess we don't have to hash this out now, but I would love to understand the no part of your answer a lot better.
Okay.
I would suggest maybe we do a deeper dive on that one-on-one, or we could meet.
That's what I
smaller
just
group.
said.
Yeah.
I'll even find a memo.
You can write it up.
I think I have one. It'll be cool. Okay.
Okay, great. Other things from delegation side on transportation? We're probably over here, right? That's what's happening?
Yep.
Other questions from the board? No? Okay, great. Two things left. One is we have two annual town meeting resolutions that have a bunch of are sort of state level questions. So it's the question about holding federal agents accountable and the National Guard issues. So I see people pushing microphones back and forth.
Not
so-
and I are fighting over who to do number one because that's the fun one.
Okay.
So.
Well, have you?
Well, I'll just, thanks, Ian. So I'll just say, number one is law now.
Great.
Ian,
That's a fun
Ian offered to, represent anybody who wants to sue the feds. I'm just kidding, he didn't say that. But yes, that's law. It started off in the House. Ian
What
did a
is
lot
number
of-
one, so that everyone watching at
Number
home
one
knows what we
allows-
put into law?
Allows people to sue federal officers federal employees in state court rather than federal court. You couldn't do that before. You could do it for state and local officials, but now you can do it for the feds. We're the first state in the country to have such a law.
Excellent. How about number two?
Yeah, and just because I can't help myself, I'm going to talk on number one. And it's, it was one of a number of bills that was introduced in the legislature last session, kind of in response to federal action. And this is one that, could make a big difference. So it's very exciting. And we'll see how it's tested, because this is inevitably going to be tested in the courts. So we'll see what happens. As to number two, so this is, I can read this one. Ensuring that a bill proposing to require the governor to review every order to place a unit of the Vermont National Guard in federal active duty status for service in a military conflict to determine whether that order was issued in conformance with the requirements of the U.S. Constitution be given a fair hearing in the state legislature. It's a long sentence. So this is a bill, I'm assuming the bill last session sort of captured the essence of this one. It sat on the wall of the Committee of Jurisdiction in the House, which is Government Operations and Military Affairs, obviously because of that second part of that committee's title. There was a lot of interest from community members in Brattleboro and across the state to have that bill be heard. And by heard, I mean have testimony taken on it, kind of have it go through the legislative process starting at the committee level. And that didn't happen. So I think what I can speak to on this item is that, and by I mean I can think for the delegation, is that that committee will inevitably have new leadership this coming session, because the chair of that committee is not running again. And so you never know who's going to be the chair of any committee. It's up to the speaker when you have a new biennium, and we're going to have a new speaker this one. But I can tell you that the potential people who it could be, and also whoever it will be, that this is something that we will make sure is something that they will take up and have do that process of taking testimony. And I think that if it is someone that I think it could be, we've already had conversations with at least the individuals who it could be. But that said, I do want to hedge that a little bit and just say you never really know who could be the chair of a committee. But and so I would anticipate this being introduced again by maybe more than one rep and or senator. And so it will go back to the Committee of Jurisdiction and it will get its day in court.
And I'll just add, my understanding was there was just a bill introduced in the House this last biennium, and it might be useful for community members who this is really important to make sure there's a bill introduced in the Senate as well.
Yeah.
Great. Board, questions or comments? Then we will move it. Oh, go ahead. No?
Because of my work, which has been
Oh, wait, you're going to talk on this one?
but I just wanted to add on to something that Emily said, because my work, I'm aware that that Andy Perchlik, who's a member of the state Senate, and a number of other people, more than 30 other people, candidates for the legislature, have endorsed this. So I would be surprised if it weren't introduced in the Senate in the new session.
And,
And I think they're suggesting in both chambers, not one or the other.
Right.
yeah, and I think that sounds like that's the plan. It'll get introduced in both, and then that's good because that way that conversation can start in both bodies, and then I would imagine where it kind of makes more sense, it will move forward if it moves forward from one body or the other with whatever it looks like if it does. And so, yeah, I think I'm glad that it has. It has a path to at least have the conversation, which I think is a very reasonable ask. So I feel confident on that.
Great. Well, then let's move ahead to our last item, which is just a very small charter check-in, which is basically, I think, to tee it up, there are the 2 charter petitions sitting at the state level right now. There's also, I think, the very strong expectation that we will, well, at least be putting a draft charter to a vote in the next, before the end of the session, and then you guys will have that. So what does this look like from a state perspective? Are there any questions or thoughts from the state side towards the town side?
So after discussing this amongst ourselves extensively, talking to various members of the Select Board and the Charter Review Commission, it makes the most sense for us to wait for that charter to be finalized and put forward to us before we bring any. The way a charter change works in the legislature is it's actually drafted as a bill and introduced as a bill. And so we would wait to have any bills drafted until that charter is finalized and approved by the town. And then we would put that charter forward as a piece of legislation. Charters are the only one of the only pieces of legislation that are not subject to something called a crossover deadline or a drafting deadline. And so they can be introduced at any time in the session, unless they are very controversial. Statewide, they can be very controversial at the municipal level and move quickly. If they are sort of a new statewide idea, like, say, youth voting or non-citizen voting or something like that, or like guns in bars, all of those things can get. Please.
Is that a thing?
That's Burlington, yeah. So charter changes that are sort of nationally or state level controversial can take a very long time to move forward. And our youth vote petition took years for your legislative delegation to move it forward, and it's a delightful miracle that we were able to do that, honestly. And I hope all the youth are truly enjoying voting. It's a really incredible opportunity and privilege they have here in Brattleboro. So please do make sure that you vote in your local election if you are a 16 or 17-year-old in Brattleboro. But we don't anticipate that this charter, even though it's going to probably be complex and long and maybe even municipally complicated, will take that long to move once it's introduced. So if it does pass at town meeting in March, we anticipate that we would probably be able to move it forward before the end of the biennium and maybe even before the end of next legislative session.
Great, thank you. And just for anyone listening, I'm going to say that you said pass at town meeting. It is the current opinion of the town attorneys that if it comes to a vote in March, it will be on the ballot.
Oh, sorry, that's what I meant.
So
Okay, sorry. I meant town meeting day.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's helpful for us to know the timeline.
Yeah.
So, we'll be anticipating that there might be a vote in March, and so that we can be expecting it to come in. If whatever happens with it, there might be something that comes to the legislature afterward.
Yeah, and from Kate's comments in public participation, it sounds like the Charter Commission is looking to finalize its work soon, this month, which I think will be very exciting for everyone involved. Okay, fantastic. Questions from the board? on the charter? Seeing none. Emily?
I have a closing comment of this whole.
Do we want to
this
hear from
whole
the
thing
public?
Please, yeah.
Before
would
we
you-
hear from the public, if we could.
Fantastic.
I believe this is the last meeting that Molly Burke is going to attend as a sitting legislator here at the Select Board. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank her for a incredible many years of public service to our town in this particular way and all the incredible work that she has done for our community. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Molly.
It really means a lot to have your support, and I think it's great that we have this relationship, town, state, trying to bring things together, and I've really appreciated that, what the Select Board has been interested in. So, thank you.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you, Emily, for saying that. All right, let's hear from the public. For everyone who sat here so patiently, any questions or comments? Chief Evans has a question or comment.
Jeremy Evans, the police chief. I just want to comment on Ian's dashing outfit he has on today.
Oh.
All kidding aside, the accountability docket, I just wanted to say that the town, police department especially, has really collaborated hard on the accountability docket right from the get-go, getting involved in making sure that we could get it, working with the sheriff's office to make sure that we can collaborate on transport, to make sure people can get here for it. And most recently, once it started, I spent a few days at accountability docket, watching how things were going, and worked with both the public defender's office and the state attorney's office and the court to look at the docket, see who was supposed to be there, because these are some of the most challenging people that we have in our community. So looking at who's supposed to be there and anticipating that they might not show up, and then going out in the community with our BRAT members and with our police officers to find them and get them to court, because getting them into their hearings saves all of us a lot of time. It gets those processes started, gets things working, and by them not showing up, there may or may not be a warrant that gets issued. It may be, it exacerbates that whole timeline with how long before they get rounded up to bring to court to start the whole process over again. So we're trying to expend some resources ahead of time here and see how that works to help facilitate the beginning of that process. Just want to let you know what we were doing.
Great, thank you, Chief.
And I just want to say a massive appreciation to the chief and the department because they are a pretty critical component to this, especially in how it's expanded their responsibilities for transportation with Southern State Correctional Facility. And I think it just highlights that this accountability docket is pulling in community partners from like across the county, and they have really stepped up like across the board. And I feel bad that we didn't thank all the different people. I don't want to spend all the time now, but I'm really appreciative of the work you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ian. Other comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, I think we'll thank you all. Did you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing. We got to hear an appreciation of you, Molly, from your colleagues. But I just wanted to also say from perspective as a constituent of yours, I have so appreciated your longtime work on transportation, your persistence, and your vision for bringing the concerns about the climate crisis to the state legislature when that wasn't popular and not many people were talking about it. So thank you for being that lone voice and for sticking with it. And for your amazing constituent contact, seeing you knocking on the doors of people in your district year after year when I really don't think you had anything to worry about when you were running for re-election, but because you believed in being responsive to your constituents and maintaining that contact. So thank you for your leadership.
I met a lot of really great people. Yeah, and we do need to do more on the climate issue. It's sort of fading a little bit because of, I don't know, the political climate. So, yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, I think we'll thank you all. Did you have a?
Thank you. various reasons, but
fading in interest as every country is on fire also.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
I think there's still a lot of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for coming,
Thank
spending
you,
the
everyone.
time. It was a great conversation, and I assume anyone who's interested in more can reach out to any of you individually or any of us and have a much longer conversation.
Absolutely. We're all
Absolutely.
very easy to
Thank
find.
you. Or
Thank you all.
succinct, if people want succinct.
Actually, Wendy and I will be back here for the Putney Road presentation
Yes.
on the
Great.
15th.
All right, thanks to everyone for waiting. I know we ran long there. I think we may be able to move kind of quick going forward. We'll see. The Detman Bridge grant is next up. I think, Brian, are you going to be helping us out?
Yes, so I've been here before on the Community Development Block Grant, disaster relief grant we received to reconstruct the Detman Bridge, or actually to tear it down and build a new one entirely. We've been working on getting the environmental release, which should be complete in 2 more weeks. At that point, we're going to be signing a grant agreement. As part of developing that agreement, they asked us to refine the budget. The original budget of $1.83 million was developed 2 years ago for a hazard mitigation grant with some assistance by an engineering firm the town has worked with. So the ACCD, the Agency for Community and Commerce Development, I'm forgetting it now, they went into more detail with it. They wanted to see it cover some things like project delivery costs, which is management costs. They didn't feel that we had adequate funds for demolition of the existing bridge. So we added in funds for demolition based on the cost of the demolition of McNeil's, and then some project performance, which we actually anticipate some of those costs are going to be done in-house. Similarly, the cost of demolition, again, I used McNeil's because that's a fairly challenging site, and depending on permitting, demolition might be challenging here. But if we get a good permitting results from the state stream alteration, we might actually be able to do it quite cheaply, just get equipment in the brook at a low flow area and remove it. But the upshot of adding those two is the final cost is about $2 million. I think that's a really conservative and realistic cost, and I think there are opportunities for doing some value engineering based on the other bridge in Tri-Park that was replaced, that we could actually bring the construction cost down. We'll definitely look at some areas where we can do some things internally. And of course, in some cases, there's just such value in hiring out that we'll do that. But the state does want to make sure that the town will commit to the full cost of the project. And, you know, that's the full cost at a conservative number. And we have to sign off on that agreement before we can actually sign off on the grant agreement itself.
Great. Thank you, Brian. So summing up my understanding, we are committing to this extra about $250,000 in actual spending by the town. We will make efforts to secure grants, but there's no guarantee of that. If we do end up having to pay this extra cost, this is just something we will work into the capital projects plan. And that lower priorities might then slide to another year. Is that roughly the shape?
Yes, and in addition, what Brian was saying is we will try to value engineer it
Yes.
and bringing the cost down so that we don't need to spend additional funding.
And I think the other component for me is that this is a brand-new critical bridge to a place that is home to 4 or 5% of the total population of the town. So
Yep.
even if we have to spend all this money, we're getting a really important $2 million bridge for 1/10 the price.
And as Representative Kornheiser mentioned, we want it to be able to take a mobile, manufactured home across that bridge, so.
Great. Other questions from the board?
I think you hit everything, Oscar. And I mean, also in the memo, it was noted like the cost and the necessity to evacuate people from there because of the bridge and its like inability to withstand a certain level of flooding, right?
Yes, undersized for conveying floodwaters.
Currently, yep.
Well, so that's what I mean, just like another impetus to even, there's costs incurred, even if this replacement weren't going to go forward and we need the replacement.
Great. Amanda?
Hi, thank you. I wondered, Brian, you mentioned some of the costs we could do in-house. So does that mean through our Department of Public Works? Maybe asking a stupid question.
Oh, you're exactly. Would be Public Works, and some of planning would be doing some of the reporting work in-house as well.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Great. Well, I would accept a motion from a member of the board. It should be in the administrative report.
I'll motion. I'll motion to authorize the town manager to commit $256,725 towards the local match for a $1.7 million community development block grant disaster relief from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development for the replacement of the Detman Drive Bridge.
Great. Any comments or questions from the public? Sue?
Since Susan Belleville, Brattleboro, based on the comments that we're going to be finding funds that we don't currently have allocated within the current budget, I'd like to know what those projects and services are not going to be paid for if we're reallocating money. I'd like a detailed list of what that looks like so we as taxpayers can know what is not going to get done based on what we approved at town meeting for a budget.
John?
So this is for funding that would be in the fiscal year '28 budget, not in the current year's funding. So it wouldn't displace any existing projects. It could potentially displace things that we would want to do in the FY28 budget development, but that of course will be a big discussion from November through the end of the year with the select board, and you can see at that point the trade-offs that this would entail.
I think it's really important that the taxpayers know what's going to get shifted to another level when it was already targeted as a priority for a capital expenditure.
I don't think there's a way we can answer that question right now, Sue. It's just something we'll have to solve as part of our prioritization process when we do next year's budget.
And consider it an FYI for upcoming discussions on the budget.
Thanks, Sue. Other questions from the public? Oh, yes, Amanda.
I have a clarification question. Brian mentioned that the grant was 1.83 million, but our motion says 1.7 million. Is that discrepancy important or not?
I misspoke, Amanda. We made two grant applications. One was for 1.83 million, and that was an oversubscribed grant, and we did not receive that. Then we made the community development block grant application, again for 1.83 million. They were not able to award the full amount, so they awarded 1.7 million. And so we're going for that gap at this point.
Okay, sorry for my misunderstanding.
Other questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to the board for a vote. Peter has moved to authorize the town manager to commit $256,725,000 towards the local match for a $1.7 million community development block grant disaster relief from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development for the replacement of the Detman Drive Bridge. All board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
That carries 5-0.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes, thanks, Brian. Okay, solid waste RFPs. Who are we having today?
Yep, Dan Tyler and Pete Lynch are going to join us to discuss the progress that they've been making on solid waste.
Great. Welcome, gentlemen.
I think Stephen Dotson is online as well.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. And yeah, Stephen is here with us, and he'll have some input as the discussion goes on. So we're back to talk about trash. And while we had a short hiatus, we have some important work ahead of us, and we wanted to come to the board and talk to you about where we're at. So back in April, you folks allowed us to sign a contract with Casella that essentially ends at the end of this fiscal year. And that contract had very little impact on the community, and it kept the budget at reasonable figures. And at the same time, the town of Brattleboro Public Works took on weekly compost pickup. And I'm very, very excited to sit here and say to you that that program is going very well. The people that we have on the truck and collecting daily have great buy-in and are working very hard to connect with our citizenry. So we're feeling really good about both financially and from a programmatic standpoint, that things are going well. Soon after the budget passed and we started working towards the latest contract, John came to Public Works and asked that we start to prepare something for the upcoming years, fiscal years, in terms of a solid waste contract. He challenged us to address the items that we heard during previous meetings over the last 18 or 20 months. He challenged us to engage with contractors, many contractors, both small and big, to better understand how they could facilitate business within our area. And he really challenged us to come back to the board during budget season with figures that would be appropriate, so as you folks are budgeting for the next fiscal year, you will have something in place. And so, along with the planning department and a member of the community, a few of us sat down and started working in May towards how we might come up with solutions and eventually have an RFP that we could put out that would address all those things that I've previously spoken about. We understood pretty quickly that on our own, we had a lot of questions as a group and tried to understand what direction might look like. And we felt like it was in our best interest to put out a request for information and solicit as many of the local and area contractors as we could to understand what their capabilities were and what they might be inclined to engage with us on over a bidding process. So I'm going to ask Dan if he'd be willing to talk about the RFI, and then Stephen to talk about the RFP, and I'll wrap it up with a timeline.
Sure, thanks. So the RFI, request for information, the committee of staff sat down and put together a list of, it was 11 categories, 34 questions over 11 categories. And that really all spoke to, as Pete mentioned, what we heard through the previous negotiation, contract structures, service structures, possible alternates to the way we're doing it now. That was distributed to 11 contractors, kind of regionally, anyone that we thought might be interested in servicing Brattleboro. To highlight some of the categories that we asked questions about, it was really, interest in different service models or collection streams, kind of like, do they want one or all of the streams? What their experience with pay-as-you-throw is. We thought that was an important one. We heard a lot about it. We're receiving income from the bag sales now that offset the collection costs of the solid waste. So we thought it was important to hear about their experience and possible alternate structures that they might have. Customer service and technology, recognizing that there's probably going to be a shift in services and how they're going to reach out to the customers and make that as easy as possible. And really what their capacity is for that kind of work and what sort of contract they might be looking for in terms of length and pricing structure. So in the end, we heard back from 4 contractors. the vendors' responses really clearly highlighted the industry's movement towards a automated cart-based system. But they all spoke to how that could be, implemented with a pay-as-you-throw type system. The responses represented, there was representation from different size vendors, mainly large vendors, and we attributed that to really about the same time we were launching this. There was an acquisition of a couple of our small local vendors by USA Waste Systems, which is a larger hauler. So there really aren't the small vendors locally to respond at this point. And it seemed like all of the responses we got, the vendors that responded are interested in the whole package. And we did include compost in that. I mean, as Pete said, that program is working successfully, but we thought it was worth gauging their interest, just to, we can get pricing in the RFP. Stephen will speak to how we place that as an alternate bid to inquire and see if it's something that maybe there is a potential savings there. So really, we took all of the information that we got back from the RFI and work that into the draft RFP that Stephen's going to discuss tonight. And, hopefully we're moving forward more informed and able to answer, a lot of the questions we heard through the last process. And, I think it really helped us learn about the capabilities of the industry in this area. So I think I'll throw it over to Stephen to talk about where we are with the RFP.
Hello, Selectboard. Yep. So we have designed a lot of this around exactly what I was just describing, the results of figuring out what the market is for these kinds of services in this moment in time, right, through the RFI. So a lot of what the RFP is based around is prioritizing those needs that he highlighted, which really are around, I would say, cost, maintaining resident behavior and not asking people to change drastically, maintaining a meaningful pay-as-you-throw model, which we believe could take many forms, and more options could open up in the future around that in terms of technology that could perhaps weigh things instead of use volume in the sense of bags. So we're trying to invite creative answers, and we're trying to look forward at what is possible. We also want to maintain the diversion rates that we have between the streams. And so that is one of the analytical criteria we'll analyze these things on. And we think we're going to really appreciate the benefit of competitive bidding throughout this process because of there being now multiple capable vendors who can provide these services. So for us, a 5-year contract is the goal at this point, with a 2-year extension that would be optional. And that would prevent us from having to go through more of these negotiations and talking about this, in further select board meetings. There's a big piece of this that we're trying to balance and maintain the quality for the price, the bang for the buck for the Brattleboro taxpayer here. And hopefully, because we have a competitive bidding process, we will see some very interesting options. This is just asking you guys to allow us to move this forward. We will come back to you, of course, with a lot of other details on the responses we get and what we consider to be some of the best offers. And the options that Dan mentioned around alternate bids, we have what are called bid alternates. So addenda to the bid itself that gives bidders the option to say, okay, here is what I would pay for compost service, or here's what I would pay for recycling service on a weekly basis instead of a bi-weekly basis. And so we've invited those, and we will see what we get back. And it will give us good metrics just to compare what different service looks like and compare our own ability to provide service, which currently we feel pretty confident about. I think it's going really well for the composting program. I think I'll keep it at that because I know we're getting late in the night and we're trying to move quickly, but I'll send it back to Pete for the timeline.
Thank you, Stephen. So we would like to get an RFP out as soon as possible. We hope to keep the RFP out for about 30 days to allow vendors to really have a good opportunity to respond to the RFP. Once the RFP is back, we're going to take what we think is close to a month to evaluate the proposals and to understand through a scoring system where those vendors fall and be able to come back. We're hoping in October to share with you and the potential of having a bid award at that time. And after that, we will take some time to negotiate those fine details that would be in a contract and have some sort of announcement in December, if everything goes well, about where we're headed for the next, hopefully, 5 years.
Great. Thank you all for the presentation. I think for structure's sake, it probably makes sense to start with a motion, if someone would care to make one, and then we can discuss. Yes,
I move.
I'm happy to make the motion.
Isaac's going to do this one, Amanda.
I move the select board approves the attached draft language for a municipal solid waste collection and disposal services request for proposal, RFP, and authorize staff to advertise and distribute the solid waste RFP.
Okay, thank you, Isaac. Comments or questions from the board? I have none. I'm seeing none so far. Members of the public, comments or questions? There are only 3 people in the room, for anyone watching.
Oh, spoiler, man. Could have made that sound bigger.
Hundreds of people.
Hundreds.
So, seeing none, Isaac has moved to approve the attached draft language for a municipal solid waste collection and disposal services request for proposal, RFP, and authorize staff to advertise and distribute the solid waste RFP. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries 5-0. Fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Thank
We'll
you.
look forward to hearing the results of that.
Stick around.
Yeah, stick around. 2 more items left. Next up is the Signal Hill Pump Station.
Sure. Signal Hill Pump Station project is a water system improvement project to upgrade an existing pump station. It's part of the Phase 1 utility improvement bond that was approved at the 2023 representative town meeting. Following the approval at town meeting, we completed final design, submitted our funding applications, and then experienced a very long waiting period to get final approval on the project and the funding, about 2 years. In that time, costs increased significantly. So the original project, it's 3 projects. It's the Signal Hill Pump Station project. It's a generator at the Black Mountain water tank, and it's a water main improvement on the Bridge Street, Depot Street area. The bond for all 3 of those projects was about $1.98 million. When we advertised Signal Hill, we received 1 bid for $1,880,990. So almost the original bond amount. We did not receive any bids on the generator project. We did solicit bids locally, and we were able to work with a local electrician who gave us a price of about $181,000 for that project. And we have not pursued pricing on the Bridge Street yet because of the cost increases that we saw on these two. So there is an opportunity to amend the loan. It would increase the total loan amount to $3.17 million. The original terms of that bond were 40 years, 0% interest with a 50% subsidy. There's money left. We hear there's money left in the program, that if we were to pursue the loan amendment, it's likely that the additional money would be at the same terms. So, you know, I think it's a great opportunity to complete these projects. The scope of the projects hasn't changed any. It's just the cost that has gone up. The Signal Hill and the generator project, those are both identified as deficiencies on our sanitary survey by the state of Vermont. So those two really need to be done, whereas the water main it's an undersized main where we've experienced problems in the past, and you know, we really added that in to take advantage of the bond and the funding opportunity. In terms of the payback, you know, we'd pay back half of that amount. In terms of rates to the customer, when we originally approved this bond through the capital improvement program with the utility, we set aside what would have been our 50% of the original project. We've spent some of that on engineering, which will be eligible for reimbursement, but currently there's about $984,000 set aside for these three projects. So if we were to pursue the loan amendment, that $984,000 pays for the first 24 years of that bond. So any rate increase, you know, we can spread out over a long period of time, and it's really going to be pretty insignificant for the value we're getting on the loan. So I think the ask tonight would be to approve the contract for Signal Hill and approve submitting the application for the loan amendment.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. My only real question here is the single bid we got for the pump station. I'm assuming that even though there was no competing bid, it is within it looks okay.
Yeah, Dufan Group evaluated the bid. There are some areas that they felt were a little high. We have had an initial conversation with the contractor, and we will pursue ways to lower those costs and seek savings through change order. But we can't, the way the funding works is we can't negotiate with the contractor until we award the project. So we would anticipate a savings. I'm gonna guess a couple $100,000 on that project would be our goal.
Okay, great. Other questions from the board? Questions, comments from the public? Seeing none. It's like we need a motion. Yes, go ahead, Isaac.
I move to award the contract for the construction of the Signal Hill Pump Station to Saluzny Excavating, Inc. in the amount of $1,880,990 and authorize the execution of a loan amendment application to the existing Drinking Water State Revolving Fund loan, increasing the total loan amount to $3,170,000.
Okay, Isaac has made the motion as stated. All board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Carries 5-0. Thank you both.
Thanks, guys.
All right, last but not least, welcome the fire department to the table for the first reading of the new fire alarm ordinance. And I'm sorry you guys had to wait so long. We'll make sure to have you up first next time.
That's not true.
I'm
going to remember you said that.
Yeah.
You should. And John will remind me when we do our next agenda.
Not sure that's possible.
Thank you,
Well,
Oscar.
if John won't let me do it, then I guess we can't do it. I don't know.
That's fair. Thank you. So when our fire alarm superintendent retired, AC Cure took over all those responsibilities and is our subject matter expert. So he's going to be presenting the fire alarm ordinance this evening.
Well, I shouldn't say I took over all those responsibilities. Some of our staff have assisted me in that, and I appreciate that. So this is a topic that I can geek out pretty quickly. So I'm going to try to keep it fairly simple. But essentially, we're here to discuss the municipal fire alarm system. So all the red boxes that you see throughout our community, both on the street corners and attached to buildings, we have about 350 of those. And those originally started pre-1900, somewhere in the late 1800s was our first fire alarm box that we installed in our community. So some of this technology, well, actually most of this technology that we're here to discuss or decommission of is technology from pre-1900 era. And while it's still very reliable in nature, it is not super cost effective anymore. It takes a great deal of maintenance and upkeep, and we no longer can really get parts for. In 2018, the select board made a decision to begin to invest in a radio box system, and that technology is already installed within our dispatch. We spent roughly $100,000 during that time period to begin to transition from what we call the 100 milliamp service, or the regular municipal radio fire alarm system, over to a radio box system, the municipal radio fire alarm radio box. And that utilizes FM technology through some repeater systems to essentially deliver the same alarm. All alarms are received through dispatch in our central fire station. So currently, right now, we are receiving both the radio box system and the fire alarm box system. Here I ask you to approve the ordinance as presented. However, I will say, before I go too much further, the ordinance that you have is in the backup material is an edited version. I'm not sure how that version, it is 100% accurate to the version. It just has some edits in it from town council. I have the actual ordinance here without any edits in there for you if you so choose, or if anybody from the public would also like that. So going back into a little bit more of this system, like I talked about the municipal fire alarm system, great deal of maintenance. We no longer have that fire alarm superintendent, so we no longer have that position to maintain the services in our community. Those services require testing quarterly. We're not really able to do that anymore. The radio alarm fire alarm box does that automatically. We're going to immediately start to see a reduction in cost to this system, making this switch over. The reason I come here today to explain all of this is, while we instituted this technology in pre-1900s, there's been no real ordinance to say you are required to have a municipal box or a radio box connected to the town system. I don't know how or why that's always been the place. I suspect because there's a significant cost savings to the building owner to have their fire alarm system tied to the town system. Nobody's really ever bucked that system to say, no, I don't want to do that. So we're at a point where industry standards are changing so rapidly. We have a lot of vendors coming into our community that will adhere to the NFPA and then be surprised when they realize, oh, there's this other technology that I can install in this building that will be much better for the community and much better for the end user, the owner of the building. So to clarify that and to simplify all the means, defining that in our ordinances, will be very beneficial, not only as a cost savings to the end user, but a cost savings to the community by defining how we manage that system. The system that I like is defined in the ordinance in a nutshell. Will require all of the existing users utilizing the 100 mil system or the municipal radio box system, the municipal fire alarm box system, sorry, to make that switch over within 5 years, June 30th of 2031. At the end of June 30th, 2031, we will decommission the 100 mil system and be solely reliant upon the radio box system. There is a service charge for the radio box system after 2031. So we will, any existing user that is utilizing the 100 mil system, they'll install the radio box. That service will be provided for them for free until they either change occupancy of the building or change building owner. For anybody that installs the radio box system after 2030, there will be a $100 annual fee applied to that radio box for the monitoring services. This should, well, that seems like a lot of money. It's designed in nature so that we have 350 radio municipal boxes in town. Our idea is that we begin to have occupancies begin to make that transfer over to the radio box system sooner than later, so that in the last year of this ordinance change, we don't have to close out 350 radio boxes. There's an incentive to doing that. Right now, there is no charge for both the radio fire alarm box and the municipal box. Some people will ask, well, who needs to have a radio box? What defines that? That's defined in NFPA 101. So NFPA 101 defines life safety code. It defines the occupancy of a building, the use of that building, the size of that building, all determines whether or not it needs a fire alarm system or it needs a sprinkler system. Those defining marks also have to meet NFPA 72, which further defines how that fire alarm system is reported out. How does the fire department get that message? So the radio fire alarm box will meet all of those standards. It is the only one that's UL listed to do so. And you know, so the private residents, or for most people, nothing will change in this ordinance. It's the commercial users, the large apartment buildings that already need to comply with NFPA 101 that will need to follow this ordinance.
Great. Thank you both. I have a couple questions real quick. To ballpark the size of an apartment building that would have to do this, are we talking over 4 units, or are we talking you have to get pretty big?
It had to be 3 stories or 11 plus units.
Okay, great. And the other question that I just wasn't sure about, you said there's no cost for installation. Does that mean the fire department installs the boxes, or the building owner has to do it and the fire department does the inspection? And
so the building owner will be responsible for the install of the fire alarm box. If I said there was no cost, I apologize. There is a cost to obviously the install of the fire alarm box. The monitoring fees, there will be no cost to the monitoring fees and or closeout of the fire alarm box. So once the fire alarm box is installed by the electrician or fire alarm company, we need to come then program it to talk to our dispatch center and to Brattleboro Fire Department so that everything coordinates appropriately.
Okay, great. And I don't think you misspoke. I just wanted to nail that down. Great. And so I want to remind the board that this is the first hearing for the ordinance. We're not going to make a motion. Once the board's asked the questions, I will open the public hearing to the public. But first, any other questions or comments from the board?
You already answered all my questions, Chuck.
I didn't even get to geek out about it enough. So
Maybe later, right?
yeah,
That's probably what the second reading is for. I think, right? All right, well, I'm going to officially open the public hearing on the first reading of the fire alarm ordinance. Any members of the public with questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing on the first reading of the fire alarm ordinance. And unless there's any other comment from the select board, we are going to move ahead with no action.
So there's a hand in the.
Is there? Oh, please.
We got to reopen.
I'll reopen the public hearing.
I do apologize, because it hits me personally. So an existing 3-unit building that doesn't currently have a centralized fire alarm system other than the hardwired smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, they're not going to be required to retrofit?
NFPA 101 wouldn't define that you have a fire alarm system that calls outside. So a typical 3-unit apartment building would only require what you just described, fire, smoke detection, carbon monoxide detection.
Okay, I mean, it's a 3-story, not a 3-unit. It's a 2-story, 2-unit with 3 stories.
Yes, yep, that would, your building would not require the upfit under existing occupancy. If you did major renovations to that building, it would then meet the new apartment building listing and wouldn't be required to.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Any other comments or questions? Well, I'm going to close the public hearing first. Any other comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, I will reclose the public hearing on the ordinance, and then Isaac.
Well, my questions were actually about this particular ordinance.
Yes,
So-
no, we're still going. I just have to officially open and close
okay.
the public parts.
All right. So thank you, Chet, for that explanation. And forgive me if these questions you already answered.
Nope.
But
quite all right.
the municipal boxes, the red boxes around town.
Yes.
What's the plan for getting those so they're not just there, people thinking that they work when they don't?
Great question. So many of those boxes that are attached to buildings will still continue to work. We'll use a micro switch, which is just a little electronic switch that will be embedded into that, and it will trigger the radio box. So most of that hardware, the actual box itself will be attached, and you pull that and you won't notice any difference. The street boxes, we call them, the ones that are in front of buildings, on the corner of the sidewalks and things. Unfortunately, with cell phone technology, if we receive one of those boxes, it's usually in a malicious pull and or a car accident into the side of that box. And we've begun decommissioning those as they stand already, as they become damaged and so forth.
Well, and that was my other question is, why do we need these with cell phones being so prevalent, why do we need to be dealing with these radio alarm boxes?
So the radio boxes are great technology, one, for early notification on any of emergency, but they also pinpoint out specifically what that emergency is. For example, this building has a radio fire alarm box. If the fire alarm system goes off in this building and identifies that the second floor sprinkler flow is activated, instead of just getting the address of 230 Main Street, we get the address immediately, 230 Main Street, second floor sprinkler flow. We can further define that out in the radio box system where we utilize it in the Memorial Park, where if somebody pulls the AED off the hook, we immediately know and able to send an ambulance there immediately upon somebody pulling that AED out, specifically knowing it's an AED activation.
Thank you. So when I heard radio alarm box, I'm thinking of somebody making a call like they did with the call box. It's a totally different thing.
Yeah, it's much more identifying the nature of the actual emergency that's taking place, specifically the location and the nature of the emergency.
So it doesn't depend on a human being taking some action.
Negative.
Necessarily. Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
I was just kind of off of Sue's question there. So is it essentially, I heard when you said 3 stories or in excess of 11 units. So if it's 3 stories under 11 units, is it exempt or is it only exempt under current occupancy?
So there's 2 different types of classifications under NFPA 101. There's new apartments or existing apartments. And that occupancy classification is very distinctive. So if you were building a new building in town, it was 3 stories or more, you would be required to have that sprinklered and fire alarm system installed that would notify out to the fire department and therefore it would require a radio fire alarm box. If you're an existing apartment building, as much of our apartments are, dating back to 1900s, that's an existing. So that has to fall under a different code set in the NFPA 101, and it would not require that upfit to a radio box. Unless any major renovations occurred, they would then need to have conformed to the new apartment listing.
Cool, thank you.
Great. All right, I think, John.
I just wanted to say, I think the town owes a debt of gratitude to Assistant Chief Keir for his expertise in this area, and we're really grateful that we were able to cover this ability to reduce staffing and eliminate the fire alarm superintendent position and find other ways to deal with it. So.
Absolutely. The Brattleboro taxpayer is directly benefiting from you taking on this extra work, and we're all very grateful for that.
Not just me, there's an entire team.
And the entire team, yes. Well, thank you both. I think we're going to move ahead and probably adjourn, I think. But thank you for presenting. We'll be back when for the second reading?
We still have to schedule that,
Okay.
so probably next time. But
Fantastic.
September 1st.
Thank you both again.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to do it, but I feel like we should have our motion to adjourn coming from Virginia. I feel like we need that right now.
Wait, you're muted. No.
Sorry about that. Well, I feel so honored, and I'm sorry I'm not there in Vermont. Anyway, I move to adjourn.
It is moved to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone, including Seth and John
Oh, yeah.
and everyone else.
BCTV.
Bye,
And
Amanda.
BCTV. And Amanda.
Yep.
And Heidi and Eric.
Take care, Amanda.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, guys.
We'll figure out with Amanda because she's not here to sign it.
We don't need it.
Okay, great.
Oh, hang on, there's signatures.
I know.
Just one?
Well, you get an extra, Oscar.
I know you know.
And then did she leave the pilot letters on your desk?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, great.